Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Operation Smooth podcast. My name is Kevin, and been a Jets fan since 1982. I don't know if that's something right now that's really be bragging about, but it is what it is. Jets fan since 1982, and tonight I'm going to talk about obviously the big story coming out of the NFL, and that is that Mike Tomlin has stepped down as coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers after 19 seasons. 19 seasons in which Mike Tomlin never ever had a losing record. And I think even though there were some complications towards the end of his tenure, that speaks volumes, especially after the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger, a big part of the Mike Tomlin era. And even without Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin continued to have winning seasons up until the end, up until unfortunately last night's game, in which they got smacked around by the Houston Texans in the AFC wildcard game, 30-6, a game in which the Steelers were down 7-6 at halftime. But it didn't matter. That Houston Texans defense suffocating with great work by Will Anderson Jr. on one defensive tackle slot, and then Daniel Hunter in the other defensive end slot, I should say. Former New York Jet Sheldon Rankins with a defensive touchdown. Yet again, another former New York Jet having success away from the green and the white. It just seems like this New York Jets franchise is cursed. We hear all these rumors, all these conspiracy theories about Joe Namath in Super Bowl three, and it just seems like for me, it seems like the older I get, seems like the more believable and credible those conspiracy theories are. With that being said, we're not going to focus on that today. We're going to focus on Mike Tomlin and what that could mean in the future for the New York Jets. Obviously, a rough first season under this current coach, Aaron Glenn. 3-14, a terrible defense, only 26 sacks this season, and even worst of all, zero interceptions in the 2025 season. The first team in the history of the NFL to have zero interceptions throughout an entire season since interceptions been have been kept track of back in 1933. So obviously the seat is hot for Aaron Glenn going into the 2026 season. It has been confirmed that Aaron Glenn will return as New York Jets head coach in 2026, along with Darren Muji, the general manager, who also started this past season in 2025. If I were running the show, which I'm not, uh, I would do my due diligence and at least reach out to Mike Tomlin and gauge what his interests are. There's a lot of rumors that Mike Tomlin could be going into television. I've seen some stuff today on some other podcasts saying that certain television networks have been in contact with him for quite a while. You could see the writing on the wall, I think, as far as his tenure in Pittsburgh. I think maybe if Pittsburgh had gotten to the Super Bowl or maybe even won the Super Bowl this year, maybe Mike Tomlin would come back. With that being said, there's been some, how can I say this? There's been calls over the last about 5-6 years by Pittsburgh Steelers fans for Mike Tomlin to be fired. So on a day like today, the Pittsburgh Steeler Nation got what they wanted. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. It'll be interesting to see who replaces Mike Tomlin as Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. It would be a crazy world if next season Kevin Stefanski, the former coach of the Browns, were the coach of Pittsburgh next season, and then John Harbaugh, the former coach of the Ravens, who got fired a little over a week ago. Imagine John Harbaugh taking over as coach of the Cleveland Browns, and then Mike Tomlin, the former coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, next season being the coach of the Baltimore Ravens. The owner was even asked about it. I don't see that happening. I think the rivalry runs a little too deep between Pittsburgh and Baltimore for Mike Tomlin to become the coach of the Baltimore Ravens. But in this wild and crazy world, you never know. Now, as far as the New York Jets, again, like I stated earlier, Aaron Glenn had a miserable first season, 3-14. The owner Woody Johnson has stated that, well, not basically stated, that's kind of been confirmed that Aaron Glenn would return as coach of the New York Jets for the 2026 season. Again, if I'm Woody Johnson, which I'm not, I would call Mike Tomlin right now and gauge to see if he has any interest in coming to New York. The likelihood of Mike Tomlin in 2026 as New York Jets head coach is not likely, but just kind of hear me out on this. Mike Tomlin might decide to take a year off. There obviously the rumors of him going into TV are very tempting to him. He might just be burnt out from coaching. He might even be burned out just from living in the city of Pittsburgh as long as he has, and that happens not just in the NFL but just in the real world. Sometimes anybody that's watching this podcast, anybody that's ever moved from one state to another or from one country to another, sometimes it's not even the job, it's just the place that you live in. You just feel that it's time to move on. The place that you live, the place that you work at, the city that you work at, it feels kind of stagnant and you're ready for a new beginning. So that might be what Mike Tomlin does. uh, the circumstances, people are obviously comparing him to Bill Cowher because Bill Cowher resigned back in 2006. The circumstances of Bill Cowher resigning from the Pittsburgh Steelers head coaching position back then, way different from Mike Tomlin's situation. A lot of people thought that Bill Cowher would only be on TV for a year, and here we are 19 years later. Bill Cowher still working for CBS, does a great job in my opinion. It could be a situation where Mike Tomlin goes to TV for a year and maybe he likes it so much that he decides, hey, you know what? I'm not going to come back to coaching. Why put my mind and my body and my soul through all that where I can just sit here and just analyze and give you my perspective with all my years of experience. It could be that he'll take a year off and then come back into coaching, which would probably benefit the New York Jets. And the reason why is because if Aaron Glenn does not have a good 2026 season, which as the Jets roster is currently constituted, there's no way they'll win more. They would win more than 3 games next year, especially with the schedule that they have. In 2026, the Jets are going to play the AFC West and the NFC Central. So you're going to play Kansas City, you're going to play the LA Chargers, and you're going to play Denver. You will play Oakland. Excuse me, not Oakland. Excuse me, Las Vegas Raiders. I just showed you how old I am by saying Oakland Raiders. The Raiders should improve some. You know they're going to draft Fernando Mendoza. Then on top of that, they're going to be playing the NFC Central. So they're going to play the Bears. Look at the Bears now, huh? They're going to play the Packers. They're going to play the Minnesota Vikings, and they're going to play the Detroit Lions. So that schedule for the Jets is going to be brutal next season. So, maybe in 2026, maybe Aaron Glenn might be a dead man walking, okay? Because of that schedule. Again, obviously there's going to be a lot of changes in that Jets roster as and again, let me reemphasize, as much as we need a franchise quarterback, that defense for the Jets is terrible. It's absolutely god awful with the stats that I mentioned earlier. On the other hand, look at that Houston Texans defense. Man, that defense is nice. Man, imagine if the Jets had a defense like that, even with a halfway decent offense, the Jets would make the playoffs without a problem. But it's up to Aaron Glenn and Darren Mooney to be able to build that team. Obviously, Aaron Glenn has not given us any faith that he can build a roster, develop a quarterback, and so on and so forth. Mike Tomlin has been there, done that. So I think the reality for me, the Jets have a better shot at hiring Mike Tomlin, accepting the New York Jets coaching position. Much to me, it's a much more realistic option than John Harbaugh. Um, John Harbaugh, 0.5% chance of him becoming coach of the New York Jets in 2026. Mike Tomlin, I would go as far as 10-15% chance that, let's just say, Woody Johnson decides, hey, you know what? You know, let me just kind of let me do some investigating and see if Mike Tomlin's interested. Again, I don't think that will happen in 2026. However, again, if the Jets, I'm going to be honest, if the Jets don't win at least 7 games in 2026, I think the pressure to remove Aaron Glenn is going to be too great, and Woody Johnson is going to have to make the decision to get rid of Aaron Glenn. And after a year off to refresh himself, perhaps Mike Tomlin might be ready to get back into coaching. And what would happen to Aaron Glenn basically would be what happened to Fredo at the end of the second Godfather movie. For all my old heads out there that watched the Godfather movie trilogy, at the end of the second Godfather movie, uh, Michael Corleone, played by Woody Johnson, has Neri, which would be played by Darren Muji, take Fredo, aka Aaron Glenn, out to the fishing boat, and if you saw the end of Godfather 2, you know the rest. That could be very well what happens to Aaron Glenn after the 2026 season. And heck, it might not even be by the end of the 2026 season. If the Jets start off, 1-5, 0-4, 0-6, it might be Aaron Glenn might be Fredo Corleone a lot earlier than that. And again, the schedule you know, with the AFC West and the NFC Central, uh, unfortunately, that's not doing Aaron Glenn any favors. So we'll see. But I just wanted to say, if I'm running the Jets, same thing with John Harbaugh getting fired the other day. I would have been calling him immediately. If I'm the Jets, I'd call Mike Tomlin anyway. I say, here's a blank check. Hey, you can coach the Jets. Heck, you can own the Jets. You want to buy the Jets, you can have them, bro, at this point. So those are my thoughts as far as Mike Tomlin resigning as coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steeler Nation, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. Wouldn't it be ironic? Because I found out today the Jets and the Steelers play each other in 2027. Wouldn't it be ironic if Mike Tomlin became head coach of the Jets in 2027, opening night in 2027, the New York Jets against the Pittsburgh Steelers, just like you had this year? You had Aaron Rodgers against Justin Fields. You could have Mike Tomlin week one of the 2027 season against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And of course you'd have to do it in Pittsburgh. You can't have that game in New York. You have to do it in Pittsburgh just to create more drama. But Aaron Rodgers, I think he's going to retire. Things things didn't work out for him. If you're being honest, the last few years with the Packers really didn't improve. Then you had what happened with the Jets. Unfortunately, that marriage was headed for disaster, especially on what was September 11 of 2023. Aaron Rodgers' first game tears his Achilles 4 plays into that season, and basically the wedding night between Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets gets completely ruined, and the marriage pretty much falls apart from there. And then with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, they didn't get any further in the playoffs without Aaron Glenn than with Aaron Glenn. So a disappointing end to a Hall of Fame career, but Aaron Glenn will be moving on and he will walk into the Hall of Fame without a problem. So those are my thoughts about Mike Tomlin, maybe as the future Jets head coach in 2026, or probably more realistically, 2027. Give me your thoughts, like, comment, subscribe. This has been the Operation Smooth podcast, and I am out.